Hey everyone, welcome back. Originally, I was planning to cover both the fight reworks and roaming bosses together in one video. However, the length of the former seemed long enough already, so today I'll be covering the Hell mod's changes to select boss fights and events, and the roaming bosses video will be coming out next week. For the sake of the mod, I'll be discussing these fights on the Hell difficulty. Lower ones will be easier by comparison. Shroud's fight is mostly similar to the original, the difference now being that archers will spawn alongside the usual root devils. This does make the fight a little more difficult. It is fairly easy to mistake one of them for Shroud. Because of this change, along with the higher amount of spawns and Hell difficulty, the side room strat is not as effective. However, there is one strat you can still do to make the fight infinitely easier. When dealing with the first batch of adds, leave one root devil live. As long as one enemy is left alive from the group, more will not spawn. Once you manage that, the rest of the fight is pretty straightforward. The Root Mother event, much like Shroud's changes, involves additional elites in the fight. Hunters and vampires can spawn in place of the usual Hulk. On top of that, the increased spawn count will make even more of said new threats present. The easiest method I found to beat the event is just to use a combination of Rattleweed and Mender's Ore with the Cultist set. I chose to slot Rattleweed on the Ricochet rifle, as it is pretty good at mod generation even without any trinkets boosting it. The strategy is to place Rattleweed in the center of the room and then gradually move it towards the steps. By placing Rattleweed here, we can make the devils and potentially elites absorb some of the archer shots. In case the mother starts taking too much damage, we have Mender's Aura to patch her out. Enemy RNG definitely plays a role here. In my run, I got 2 White Hulks to absorb plenty of attacks. I could have ended up getting more aggressive vampires or hunters who may have ignored Rattleweed. Either way, the event is still very doable. Oh boy, this fight is much more involved now. To start, both Lizzes have had their HP increased massively, and they also regenerate their health passively now at a decent rate. This makes them fairly competent at survival. They have to be caught out and surrounded pretty bad to die now. This increased HP and regen also means that Mender's Aura does not have much of an effect on them, so don't worry about trying to pop it at their feet. Instead, focus more on wiping out the oncoming threat, which has now been upgraded. Before you enter, make sure you consume an Oilskin Tonic. Have some equipped in your quick slots just in case. The fight now expands over multiple waves. It starts out with some hollows and seed callers. Nothing too bad at first. Then, some ranged guys will spawn in. You might end up seeing some snipers, rippers, or shrikes. After that, some of the filers start showing up. Their bombs aren't that bad, but watch out for their melee strikes. They can knock you down and make you vulnerable. Be careful around this point, as some rot witches may start channeling explosions beneath you. Afterwards, some sappers will come in. Be sure to watch out for their blast arrows. Next, some rotwarts will rush into the arena. Finally, we're at the last wave. Here you will fight a brutal onslaught of root enemies. All the enemies you fought before this, and then some. Devils will flood the arena, and howlers will keep their numbers up. It goes without saying, taking them out should be a top priority. A couple juggernauts will also start to show up. These guys will shred apart either Lizzes if they get caught out. It's a rough ending, and it's usually where I end up losing the Lizzes. Co-op would definitely alleviate some of the issues I faced solo. Rattleweed is certainly helpful at distracting some of the large groups of enemies from the Lizzes. Sending in some Seekers to wipe them out afterwards was a pretty effective strategy for me. While I personally wasn't able to manage keeping the Lizzes alive in my few attempts, I know it's very possible to do solo. Taking Hunter's Mark would help immensely to figure out where a Liz is being attacked from. The ending reward is pretty good though. Got lots of scrap, metal, and luminite crystals. Singe's Fight has received some new additions that can shake up the battle. First off, the adds in the fight are now far more aggressive and spawn much more frequently. In solo, you'd normally see 2 Flame Devils at once, now 3 can spawn at the same time. And as soon as you take out one, expect another to replace it swiftly. This change makes movement around the arena even more important. You will constantly be shifting your focus back and forth, so be sure to use your brief free moments to top off on buffs and ammo boxes. Singe himself at first seems unchanged, that is until you attack his wings. His wings can now be both broken off similar to his tail. When one wing is broken, he'll lose his flight-based abilities. He will, however, rely more on his wing ground plunge attack that summons an explosion beneath you. He will also dash in your direction more often to keep up with you. Should you break both wings off, he will become enraged, turning into a dark, more scorched version of himself. In this form, he will have access to a new explosion ability. He will pierce the ground with his claws 4 times. Each one will cause an explosion to appear beneath your feet shortly after. When you see him initiate the move, If you are light enough, dodge rolling 4 times was usually enough to save me. Like with one wing broken, he will be aggressive when using his dash ability. Putting as much distance between yourself and him is critical. To avoid spending too much time in this phase, I recommend trying to break the wings when he's around half health. By doing this, you can damage him normally and then focus his wings afterwards. It should make it so he has very little HP when both of them are broken. When you manage to beat him in this phase, you will be awarded with a new ring. The charred circlet is a pretty fitting reward for the challenge. I plan to cover it more in the trinket discussion video. The Undying King fight is mostly the same as it is in Apocalypse. As it turns out, the Undying King's health is still having issues with scaling due to a vanilla bug. Himself and Brabus are both NPCs when you first interact with them before the fight. This causes the game to gimp their health shortly afterwards for a little while. In the King's fight here, I never saw it get fixed. Besides that, the main difference between the mod and vanilla is that occasionally Eslin may summon Shade and or Shatter to fight for him. They can definitely cause some troubles during the fight, although their health pools are fairly low. Nothing a few sniper rounds couldn't deal with. Besides that, the fight goes exactly how you would imagine it. The fight with Dreamer and Nightmare are not too much different if you play optimally. I beat them both in a single try and I wasn't actually sure what was different. After speaking with the devs, it turns out there are a few things I unintentionally missed. Dreamer's phase features more adds as per the difficulty values, and Nightmare's Void Realm features more elite enemies that can appear. You might even spot some different bosses besides Gorefist and Shroud if you stay long enough. Besides that, just do your regular routine of farming stacks in the void and hop out when you're comfortable. And that covers every change made to fights in the mod. The devs have stated they have plans to revamp more fights, so if anything else changes, I'll be sure to cover it. Speaking of things changing, there was a patch a few days ago that brought some fixes and additions. I'll throw up a little display of the changes right here. I am a big fan of the glowing fragment cost being removed from trinkets, and I think it could be interesting to run a Peripearl and Volatile Gem build now. And that covers everything I wanted to get out for the week. Like I said, next week I'll be covering the roaming bosses. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.